Hello YouTube! Today I'm going to show you how to put LED underglow in your car. While this will work for any car, I'm focusing on the 8th generation Honda Civic Coupe. This covers model years 2006 to 2011. If you are doing this in a different vehicle, most aspects of this modification will be the same. However, you will need to find alternate ways to power the lights and route the wiring into the vehicle. For this modification, the underglow will be powered by the dome light. This will keep the underglow street legal because it will only be on when a door is opened or when the car is unlocked as you approach it. It will never be on while driving, unless of course you have a door ajar. This will also create a great effect because the underglow will dim in and out when you unlock and lock your car, and also when you close the door and drive away. If you will be doing this to an 8th generation Civic Coupe, please see my other video on how to install footwell lighting that dims with the dome light. This will give you clear instructions on how to access the wires that power the dome light and also how to tap into them. These are the lights that I used for this modification. These are 5 meter or about 16 foot long 12 volt SMD LED strips, which have a total of 300 LEDs and can be cut every 3. You can get these strips on Amazon for about $20 in the waterproof version. The waterproofing on my lights was a thick, clear, flexible plastic that was covering the top side. This made soldering connections on them somewhat difficult, but the waterproofing is important because of where the lights are going. The strips are available in many colors. For this project I ended up using 2/3 of the spool, so one was plenty. These strips do consume 24 watts or 2 amps, so I wouldn't use more than one spool if you are tapping from the dome light. This way we won't overload the dimming circuitry. Also, I would recommend converting the dome light to an LED replacement bulb. This will also help ensure that we don't overload the circuit. Now, when you're ready to start this project, I would highly recommend using car ramps. They're not necessary, however they make the job a lot easier. These ramps are giving me about 6 inches more clearance, which is nice when attaching the LED strips underneath the car. It's also good for cleaning, which you'll need to do. I also recommend that you light the area that you'll be working in well. For this purpose, a 4-foot shop light actually worked very well. This modification is actually fairly straightforward. First and foremost, you'll need to clean the underside of your car very well where the lights will be going. I used a heavy-duty degreaser twice, followed by a general-purpose cleaner. When you use the degreaser, make sure you follow the instructions on the bottle. Different degreasers require different soaking times. Once you have the area you are going to put the lights clean, measure how long the strips will need to be. For the Civic Coupe, 33 segments of 3 was a perfect length. After you have your strips cut, solder a long wire onto one end. Leave the other end alone. Before you can solder, you'll need to take a portion of the waterproofing off. This will vary with the type of strip you buy. Now, I only put the strips under the sides of the car. If you want to put them under the front and back as well, you'll need to do more soldering and be a little creative with how you route your wires. One thing that's very important to do is to check your soldering connections. Test your strips with a battery before placing them underneath your car. After you have your soldering complete and the strips are ready to go, we can move on to the next step, placement. When it comes time for placing your LED strips, you're going to want to do it on the underside of the car and make sure that you are past the length of metal that sticks down at the end that has the jack points on it. If you are past this lip here, then you won't ever have to worry about the car being jacked and the LEDs being crushed. Now, when I put these up, I put them up using epoxy. I put a lot of epoxy along the backside because the adhesive on here, while fairly strong, isn't really going to hold it in extreme conditions. Also, right now, it's about freezing temperature in my garage, and the glue on the backside of these strips just is not working that well. So you can see I've got it all along the edge here. This is the driver's side. It goes about to the back tire, and I've got it following all the way to the front. Now, one thing that's really important that you do is, for the way I have this set up, the positive is always going to be powered. So it's really important that at the end that you have your wire soldered onto, that the positive has something to insulate it from touching the car. Now, underneath my Civic, I appear to have a rust-proofing agent that I don't believe conducts electricity, so there's no bare metal. But make sure you use lots of epoxy and cover up those bare pieces of solder so that way you don't get anything touching and cause a short and burn out the circuit. Now when it comes time to get the wire to the inside of the vehicle, the Civic actually has a great way to do this without being that noticeable and without requiring drilling any holes through anything. So if you take a look at this panel here, this is plastic. It's flexible. It's really easy to move. And this is metal. Now because this is so flexible, what we can do is we can take the wire and we can bring it up and slip it between this crack. What that allows us to do is it allows us to get the wire inside the car. We'll just run it over a gasket to keep it watertight. And then we can get it up into the footwell and tap into the footwell lighting that I already have installed on this car. Now when we actually bring the wire into the car, it's important that we don't just pull straight up and go right in here. Now this is the easiest thing to do, but then we have to deal with the jack point, which is underneath. The wire is going to be going right past the jack point. So if this car ever needs to be jacked up, it's going to crush the wires. So what we need to do, we need to pull it in front up to around this point. Now we're going to have some extra wires here because it's not secured, but if I know that roughly about this point would be enough to keep that away from the jack point. So I can start taking this piece of wire, I can put in the bottom here. Now on the other side, these panels were relatively close together, and I actually had to use a screwdriver to separate them a little bit to get this in. Now on this side I actually tried it before. It's not quite so bad. One of the reasons why it may be so different between the two sides on this Civic is that this one was in a rather bad rear-ending accident shortly after it was built, which is pretty sad. But so it's not going in quite so easily, so I will need to use a screwdriver to shimmy it around. But once it's in, we can get it slipped under there and you'll only be able to see it right here. Alright, so now I've got the wire tucked in. As you can see it coming out the bottom right here. You can tuck that up tightly underneath the bottom, but this spot is pretty much unavoidable. If you're using black wire, you'll barely be able to see that. Since I'm using white wire, it's a little more visible, but hardly. So if you have one side done at this point, you basically just have to do the exact same thing that you did, but on the other side. So again, make sure you clean the underside where you're going to be attaching the lights really well. I'd use degreaser. I used it twice, followed by a general cleaner. Get your lights up. I'd use some epoxy. Make sure that your lights are working and have a nice long lead before you put them in. Tuck your wire in and you're ready to start the connections on the inside. So here we are on the passenger side. I've taken the wire that's already tucked up between the gap in the panels and it's coming in right here. Now you can move this however you want. I would move it up here behind the gasket so that it comes out right about here at this panel. The reason being is because this you cannot see when the door is closed from the inside because this matches it here. I don't know if you can see what I'm pointing to. I apologize if you can't. And also I apologize for the exposure. This blue light messes up cameras. So when you have the wire in, I tapped to my footwell lighting that dims with the dome light that I already have in here. Now, if you don't have that in, I highly recommend you do it, because if you tap into these for your power, that means this underglow is 100% street legal. The reason being is because the lights will only come on if a door is open or when you unlock your car as you approach it. Whenever your doors are closed and you're in motion, the lights will not be on. So these are legal because although they are auxiliary lights, they're never used when you're in motion. So if you're going to tap into another source, do so at your own risk because these lights very likely will be illegal where you live. Okay, now this is what your lights will act like once they're done. As you can see, when I unlocked the car and I started walking towards it, they faded on. And they'll stay on until you close the door. So now that I've closed the door and the engine is running, the lights fade out. So whenever you are actually in motion, the lights will not be on. Then, when you've reached your destination and you remove the key from the ignition, the lights will fade back on. If you open the door before removing the key, the lights will come on instantly. But then when you lock the car, the lights fade back out again. So, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do this yourself and you run into any trouble, please leave a comment and I'll try to help you out. Please keep in mind, however, that if you are performing this modification to a vehicle other than a Civic Coupe, I won't have information on where to tap the wires into or how you're going to route them. I'd also like to say that, although I believe the power hookups are the same for the Civic sedan, that gap between the panels might not be there and you might need to find an alternate way to route your wires. Regardless of whether you did this on a Civic or another car, leave a comment and let us know how it worked out. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.